Hi everybody, it's Mrs Fransisco here. I hope you're all okay. We're going to move on to the third part of photography on your smartphone. I hope you enjoyed the last two videos and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. If you've got any pictures to send me, I'd really love to see them. So, let's recap. What is photography? Have a think about what we talked about yesterday on the last video. Yeah, brilliant. So, photography is capturing light in any one given moment. So, as we talked about, being able to see requires light bouncing off an object and going into your eye, and just exactly the same. To be able to take a photo, it's about capturing the light that's going into the camera, into the lens. Okay, so we've talked about two different things that can affect the quality of your photo or the creative outcome of your photo. So we looked at aperture, and that was the opening in the camera, so the hole, and whether it's wide or narrow, and that depends how much light is allowed in. And then in the last video we talked about shutter speed, so whether the shutter's open for a long period of time, well, I mean, it's not long, it's like a second, or whether it's for much shorter periods of time, and therefore how much light gets into the lens, and how that affects a photo. And now we're going to talk about the ISO. Okay, so ISO has basically got to do with the sensitivity of the camera's sensor. So if I show you this picture, you can see at the bottom we've got the ISO 100 going up to ISO 1600. Okay, so the higher the ISO, the more sensitive the sensors of the camera are, which means that you can capture more light. So the lower down here, ISO 100, it's less sensitive, therefore it's capturing less light, and therefore the image is darker. And then it's doubling to ISO 200, 400, 800, 1600, and it's gradually becoming more sensitive, and therefore it's able to capture more light. But what does that mean for taking photos? So if your ISO is very low, it's got low sensitivity, less light is captured, so the image might be darker, but everything in that image is going to be sharp. As you can see, as we go further up the ISO numbers, once you get to 1600 and onwards, you can see that the quality of the image is not as good. So, and what is said in the photography world is that there's lots of noise in the photo, which means that it's like blotchy grains and different types of texture which reduce the quality of the photo. So changing the sensitivity, the ISO, has positives, but it also comes with quite a lot of negatives. So if I show you an image here, this is a photograph of a doll, an ISO 200. You can see that her skin looks very, very smooth. Everything's sharp, everything's as it should be, and that's how you would see it if your eye was looking at it, just without the camera. But then on the right hand side, the ISO 3200, you can see the skin of the doll looks quite mottled. It's got lots of different dots, it's blotchy, it's lots of different grains within the photo, so we say there's lots of noise. The quality of the photo is reduced. So I'm just showing you this little image here. So which ISO should I use? Obviously, we're talking about light sensitivity, the sensitivity of the camera sensors, with regards to how much light it can capture. So if you have a lower ISO, so such as 100, it might be in broad sunshine in the middle of the day, okay? It doesn't need to be as sensitive because there's already a lot of light there, and you're going to have a very sharp image. However, if you're starting to take pictures when it's cloudy, when it's overcast, when it's dusk, or when it's night, obviously there's less light there anyway. So you need to ramp up the sensitivity of the sensors to be able to capture more light, but it means that there's more grain on the image. So you have to think, when you're taking your photos, what sort of light am I in? And does it matter that there might be a little bit more noise on the photo? Is that going to damage is it going to spoil the quality of the photo? We can see what's going on with the ISO on your smartphone. So I know that on an iPhone, and I would imagine it's the same for other smartphones, the ISO is determined by the phone. So there's nothing that you can do to change the ISO. And I'll be able to show what I mean with these two pictures. So on the left-hand side, this picture, I took that in brighter conditions than I took the picture on the right-hand side. So the phone decided on the ISO, and because the conditions were bright, the ISO could be lower. So it was a lower ISO. I can't tell you what the number would be, but I know it's a lower ISO. And you can see that because the camera's sensors didn't need to be as sensitive, they were able to pick up more detail in the image on the subject. So if you can see here on the brown, you can see it's quite detailed. When you compare it to the other photo on the right hand side, so this image was taken in darker conditions, so the phone would have chosen the ISO to be higher to compensate for the fact that it was darker, because the sensors of the camera needed to be more sensitive to be able to pick up more light. But the negative of that is that the picture is not as good quality, because it is you can see that there's quite a lot of noise, like I mentioned before. So the lines around the edge of the banana aren't as sharp. Okay, you can see that on the left hand side, if you look at the grains of wood on the table, on the right hand side, it's just not as clear. It hasn't been able to pick up as much detail. There's a lot of noise, and it's not as, it's more blurry. Okay, so as I say, there's no way of changing the ISO on your phone, on your smartphone. It's something that happens automatically. Okay, so why am I telling you all of this? Basically, I'm telling you about this because when you want to post a picture, if you take a picture, for example, of your dog and you want to put it on Instagram, if you're taking it in dusky conditions, in dim conditions, the photo is not going to be as good a quality as if you were taking it during the daytime. So you might look at the photo and think, well, I don't really want to put that online, it's not very good. And you might decide to take it the next morning, because the ISO will be lower, and therefore, because it's less sensitive, it means you're going to get a better quality photo. So what do I want you to do? Okay, I'd like you to just take a range of photos using your phone and identify whether the ISO is a lower number or whether it's a higher number, and if it's set appropriately. So are the photos of a good quality? So if you take two photos of the same thing, one in the morning, one in the evening, can you tell that the ISO has changed according to the conditions that you're taking the photo in? So if it's in the morning, does it look like the ISO's low? And if so, does that mean the photo is particularly good quality, and on an evening it's not as good quality? And there's some grain on there and there's some noise. Okay, so I'd love to see your photos. Take your photos, write a short description and tell me what you think, whether the ISO is high or low. You don't need to tell me a number, just say I think it's a high ISO because, or I think it's a low ISO because. Alright then, so send over your photos. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, and take care. Bye.